Good morning, holy Yidden. Welcome. Thank you for joining. Today we're studying the entire Talmud, one page, one line at a time. Presently, we're studying Masechet Shabbat, chapter 14, page 107b. And we are still on the topic of how do we feel about trapping, injuring, wounding, or killing a creature on Shabbos? The short answer, don't do it. The longer answer is that it's complicated, as there are different types of creatures. And today we're going to embark on an interesting discussion, which we were brutally cut off smack in the middle of a sentence. And actually, I must say, Dr. Hammer was trying to alert me to the countdown, but I didn't register it until it was too late. And so we're going to go back to an interesting discussion about lice. Now, admittedly, lice is probably not the most appetizing or enjoyable conversation, but it triggers a very interesting and important discussion about the tension between science and the Talmud and some interesting solutions. And so let us share the screen. Let us get started, and it's going to be fun. Share, no, hold on. Here we go. Screen is being shared, and here is the Talmud. All right. Our Mishnah states, our Mishnah says that, let me just adjust the camera. The Mishnah says that the 8 enumerated shkatzim or amasim, the 8 enumerated crawling critters, they are not allowed to be trapped, not allowed to be have a chabura on Shabbos. Then the Mishnah continues and says, shar shkatzim or amasim, catching them, your putter, and the inference, as we did yesterday, is hahargon chayiv, to kill other of these critters, you're chayiv. The Gemara now wants to identify who is the author of this teaching. Man Tana. And I suppose the intention of the Gemara is to expose a possible diversity of opinion in regards to other creatures than the enumerated, exposing us to the possibility that there is an opinion that says even killing might be permitted. So let's, again, Hahargan Chayev, Mantana, who is the author of the Mishnah? Rabbi Yirmiyah, Rabbi Elazar. This is the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer. Why? Tanya Rabbi Elazar, Omer, HaHoyreg, Kina b'Shabbos, KaHoyreg, Gamal b'Shabbos. Rabbi Elazar teaches that one is absolutely not allowed to kill any critter on Shabbos, even a lice, or perhaps we should say louse, because lice are quite small. Probably the smallest critter that the folks of this era were acquainted with. And someone recently made a comment, don't take this as an insult, I don't know if it's true, but someone was talking about lice in the schools, and they said, you know, in Israel, it's almost a given that people will possibly have lice. What I can say, however, is that in the time of the Mishnah of the Gemara, it is likely that lice was a common part of life, as it is in many other times and places, and even to this very day. There's a reason why many of the schools before the new year insist on having every child inspected. And so it's a common issue, but that doesn't mean you're allowed to kill a lice on Shabbos. And that is the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer, which would reflect an opinion of the Mishnah that says you're not allowed to kill any critter, although you may be allowed to trap. Let's see the original. Oh, sorry. He compares killing a louse to killing a camel. What do we have in common between a lice, a louse, and a camel? Well, they are the two opposite ends of the spectrum. It's quite obvious that you're not allowed to kill a camel on Shabbos. And Rashi points out, Mishum de Gadolum. We're talking about a large critter.
Rabbi?
Yes.
What is the status of the lice relative to those 8 creatures that we discussed, in the sense that it looks like Gemara is doing something like Kal HaOmer, saying that if the Mishnah uses Kal HaOmer, saying that if you cannot kill a camel, then definitely you cannot kill a lice. Or the other way around. Not
Right.
important. What is important is that the lice seems to be a totally different creature from the Ch14 that we have discussed. And those creatures were able to contain they were impure. You shouldn't touch them even.
Hi, Michelle. It was a mistake. I was calling mommy. She's in.
That is, does the lice confirm impurity similar
All right, so let's
to those creatures?
So I don't believe so, but here's what I believe is going on. For a moment, the Gemara blended the issues, so we're going to blame the Gemara. But for the purposes of this discussion, just for a moment, let's separate the Tumah Tahara, the purity issue, and the Shabbos issue. Because the Mishnah, by mentioning these 8 animals in the context of Shabbos, was saying these are animals that are desirable. Notwithstanding their ritual impurity, their hides have value. And indeed, today, I think there's, certain, how do we call it? Certain, anyway, some of these creatures we know you'll have, well, we'll talk about the ones that are easy to talk about. A beaver, let's say, or certain reptiles that have, what is considered to be high-end products, accessories, clothing. And so they are desirable. And because they're desirable, a person trapping them is reasonable and to be expected because they have something that they want from the animal. So they're trapping it litzorech, or they're trapping it for with intention. More than that, killing, skinning, all of those steps are now part of a productive creative process. And so to the Gemara, something that you desire is obviously a problem. In addition to that, there's a more general issue with, hold on, we're getting some more sound in the background. So for example, a camel, okay, so that's as far as trapping. If you want something and you trap it, if you're likely to trap it because you desire it, there's commercial value, well, then that's considered prohibited trapping. But by inference, our Gemara says, although maybe you're not allowed to trap these items, killing is a blanket prohibition. If killing was not a blanket prohibition, our Mishnah would have added that even killing is permissible. But now, Professor, your question was, how do we compare lice to the other animals? And the answer is simple. Lice most certainly does not have a constructive purpose that you would want to have the lice. You trap lice, killing lice is not constructive. A person never kills the lice because they're going to do something creative or positive with it. They kill the lice to be rid of it. And to kill something just to be rid of it is not considered tzricha legufa, that you desire the activity for a constructive purpose. As a matter of fact, the person very much does not want to have lice. To my knowledge, it's uncomfortable and socially unappealing. And so a person doesn't want lice. So maybe there is a svara to say that you're allowed to kill a lice. Additionally, lice are very, very small and they are less, and I'm going to probably step into something I don't want to step into, but I believe lice are probably less sophisticated creatures they're a little more simple in their design. They are certainly do not have all the characteristics and features that a mammal does. And so really this statement of Rabbi Lazar is not so much a kal v'chomer as much as covering the full spectrum of creatures, from the most large, impressive, complex creature to the most small, undesirable, and simple creature, lice. And so really what he's saying is no animal, Not the biggest, not the most obviously prohibited, not even the smallest, least desirable, and least constructible. And that is what Rabbi Elazar says. The real chiddush, and Professor, I think this is what you're getting at, is that we're going to have a lengthy discussion about the possibility that lice are not considered a typical creature and may be killed on Shabbos for something that makes a lice very distinct and unique. And so when we have that knowledge, the assertion of Rabbi Elazar is more sensible. Even though a lice has many reasons why it may be killed on Shabbos, yet he includes it in the prohibition. So I hope I gave some clarity. So again, we have lice in contrast to the other critters in its not being desirable, not having something to contribute, but there are also other scientific, if you will, or other facets of its existence that make it possibly not prohibited to kill. Okay, Maskiv la Rav Yosef. Rav Yosef is going to disagree with Rabbi Yirmiyah. Rabbi Yirmiyah says that our Mishnah is only in accordance to Rabbi Eliezer, who says you're not allowed to kill anything, but there are other opinions in the Mishnah that say you are allowed to kill certain critters. Maskiv la Rav Yosef. Comes Rav Yosef with a challenge. The only reason why there's a debate about kina is something unique about a lice. So let me back up. Rabbi Yirmiyah says if you're not allowed to kill lice, you're not allowed to kill any creepy crawly, asserting that other rabbis say that you are allowed to kill the non-enumerated 8 shkatzim. And the Gemara pushes back and says, no, there is consensus that you're not allowed to kill every creature, and lice is something unique that warrants its own conversation. So now we're going to have the conversation about what is unique about lice. The whole debate between the Rabbanan and Rabbi Elazar, if you're allowed to kill a lice or not, is exclusively bikina de'ena para ve'raba. Dr. Stamler, help me out of here.
As far as I know, they do propagate.
Hold on. Don't. Let's not talk about the science. I want to know help me first. Help me with Hebrew. Then we'll talk about the science. Para ve'raba. What does para ve'raba mean?
Propagate.
They not propagate. They not reproduce. If anyone knows anything about lice, they multiply, and one only gets lice where there are already lice. So they certainly do propagate, but the assumption here is that there's something different about the way lice reproduce.
Rabbi,
Hold on one second. At the end of our Gemara's discussion, I want to talk about the comparing and contrasting science with the Talmud, and this is one of the prime instances where there is an apparent disagreement, if you will, between Talmudic science and science or medicine and science that we can observe. I don't want to go there yet because the Gemara is going to give us a lot more information about its perspective on lice, which we'll then be able to bring into the equation. Roberto, please.
I don't want to go to the science. I have another question. The category of lice is like mosquitoes. We're talking about creatures that could do you harm. So that's sort of a category by itself, different from the others.
Correct, but lice is even more potentially allowed to be killed than a mosquito, which is why Rabbi Elazar chooses that to be the most extreme scenario. Because of the very debate we're talking about. The rabbis say you're allowed to kill lice. And so that's the point. We are going to, in short order, talk about mosquitoes or gnats, and so we will get there with Hashem's help. We're just not there yet. So again, Rav Yosef challenges Rav Yirmiyah. He says, Rav Yirmiyah, you're telling me that our Mishnah, which infers that you're not allowed to kill critters, even if they're not mentioned in the Torah, is only Rabbi Eliezer? No, there's consensus. Everybody agrees. You're not allowed to kill little critters. With the possible exception of lice, because lice do not reproduce in the conventional manner that all other critters do. What does it mean that they don't reproduce? Does it mean that they don't lay eggs, which is the Gemara is going to talk about? Does it mean that they don't need a male and female component? We'll see. But at this point, the Gemara asserts that the rabbis say that you're allowed to kill a lice because a no parabara. All other little creeping and crawling vermin, critters, how do you call it? Amphibians.
Yeah, lice do lay eggs. That's what those.
Hold on. I said we're not going to talk about the science. We're going to see what the Gemara says. We'll talk about the science at the end of the Gemara. Because the Gemara is going to first talk about Other critters, the part of them that reproduce, law pligi. Everyone agrees you're not allowed to kill them. So if a critter does not reproduce, Rabbi Yosef explains that the rabbis say you're allowed to kill it. What makes an animal that doesn't reproduce in the conventional manner more or less worthy of living? Let's see. Two rabbis, Rabbi Eliezer, who says you're not allowed to kill lice, and the Rabbanan, who say you're allowed to kill lice, both extract or infer this information from elim. What are elim? Rams. Which rams? So Rashi points out, elim ma'adamim shenishchetu lemelechet hamishkan b'shvil orotehem. We know that in the tabernacle and the Mishkan, the material that covered the frame was made of ram skin, dyed in red, ma'adamim, reddened ram skins. And the only way, I hope this is not going to disappoint anyone or shock you, but the only way to procure skins of an animal is to take its life first. And so necessarily one of the steps in the creation of the Mishkan was taking the life of a ram. So now Rabbi Elazar looks at the ram and says, if the ram was the animal that was killed in the Mishkan, this will teach us, and from it we will learn the laws of killing any other critter. How so? Ma'elim sheyesh behem netilas neshama, just like a ram. The only way you procure it and the way it is treated in the Mishkan is by having its life taken, killed. Afkol sheyesh by netilas neshama. Similarly, any creature which you'll say it is alive or dead, which means essentially every creature you're not allowed to kill on Shabbos. So an animal that lives or dies mustn't be killed on Shabbos. And therefore, a lice has something very much in common with a ram. It's a critter that's alive and then becomes not alive. Yes, Eli, go ahead.
So the question is, you're not supposed to kill on Shabbos an animal, correct? So what happens if the animal has a disease or a virus that you don't know about, and a mosquito, whatever the situation is, that comes and stings you or bites you or whatever it is, and it kills you? It's a problem. So maybe we were saying maybe we could trap it and maybe get it out of our area. Or...
So let me just add the general caveat. If there's a possibility that a critter is going to take your life, human life trumps all. So all of our discussions are going to be that we know that there is not a risk to human life.
As far as lice is concerned, they're definitely dangerous in the sense that they do transmit diseases. And at the times, I remember that they were exterminated, not only because it was unsanitary or it was unpleasant, but they transmitted diseases like typhus and
lice or fleas?
No, lice.
Lice. Okay, but let me ask you a question, and I'm not doubting this. I'm just curious. Would we assert that killing a single lice mitigates the disease?
Probably not. That is, the techniques for dealing with that was first to shave everyone who had lice, and then fry their clothes. But of course, they tried to exterminate every lice that was around there, not a single one.
All right, so for the purposes of the exercise of our Gemara, let's imagine that there is not a life-threatening, that lice are not life-threatening. And of course, in the event that they are life-threatening, or that would be a good question. The question, let me reframe. The question that Ellie and the professor are asking is, at what point do we say that something it threatens life? Does it have to be more direct, or could it be more generalized? That's a good question. I don't want to address now. For the purpose of this exercise, let's imagine lice are a nuisance but do not threaten life, because again, threatening life is a important caveat that applies really in every malacha. So for this exercise, let's imagine there is no hazard, but understanding that it is possible that they could be very detrimental to health and may have a role in sharing disease. So anyways, again, Rabbi Elazar says, any critter that's like an elim, like a ram, cannot be killed. And quite frankly, every living creature is essentially like a ram. The Rabbanan disagree. And this is an interesting limud, but let's take a look. Rabbanan Savri Kelim. The rabbis say no. We learn that every critter that may not be killed has to be like the rams. Ma'elim the parim v'ravim. Just as rams reproduce in a common but also distinct manner, I've called the parim v'ravim, so to any creature that reproduces conventionally, whatever that means, they may not be killed, with the exclusion of lice, which the Gemara at this point asserts. Let's hold science off for a moment, not because we're avoiding it, but I first want to see the Gemara's science, and then we'll compare it to what we know. Amrli Abaye. So Abaye challenges this assertion that there's something different about lice, that they do not reproduce. Amrli Abaye. Abaye says, hold on. Kina ain't part of it, Rava. Are you trying to tell me that lice do not reproduce? And let's just see for a moment. Rabbi Steinsaltz translates reproduce. Okay, so far the same. The Amar Mar, we have a quote that will challenge this as follows. Yoishiv HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We're told, our sages tell us, Hashem sits bizon and provides sustenance for all creatures. Mekarne re'imim, from the horn of a massive ram. Ad beitze kinim, till the eggs of lice. And so Abaye says, you're trying to tell me lice do not have eggs? We have a teaching. The Torah itself establishes that lice do have eggs. How is the Gemara going to get out of this? Rashi, kinim ketanim, we're describing the smallest little lice as it emerges from the lice eggs. Gemara says, no, you're misunderstanding the text. Minahu demikri beite kinim. We're describing a kind of creature that is called beitze kinim. So it's not that there is actually eggs. There's a kind of species called beitze kinim. And maybe I understand Rashi be saying, maybe they're a super small variation of lice. But obviously, lice do not lay eggs. Again, hold off on what we know about it, lice. So the Gemara doesn't stop here. But Tanya, okay, you may have effectively negated that teaching from Gemara Avodah Zarah about how Hashem sustains the largest creatures to the smallest creatures. But we also have a teaching that says, Tifoye noveitze kinim, a brisa that talks about little kinds of insects. Rashi, shirutz hatifoye noveitze kinim asnisihi v'lo yadana hechatani. Very interesting. The Gemara quotes a brisa, and Rashi says, I am unfamiliar with this brisa. Suffice it to say, the Gemara has a text that describes beitze kinim, lice, eggs. So the Gemara says, no, the same answer. Minahu demikri beitze kinim. There is a kind of critter called beitze kinim. So the Gemara continues on the reverse and says, Hare parosh the paravaraba. You have a gnat or a flea, which they do procreate, they do reproduce. The Tanya, there's a brisa that fills in the perspective of Rabbi Elazar and says, Hatzod, Parish b'Shabbos, you trap a gnat, a flea on Shabbos. Rabbi Elazar mechayev, Rabbi Yeshua poiter. Rabbi Elazar says you're chayiv for trapping it, and Rabbi Yeshua says that you're potter. What do I see from here? That even creatures that clearly do lay eggs, there is also a debate if you're chayev or potter from killing it. And so how can you assert that the only debate in our Mishnah, remember we're going back to our Mishnah says that all critters cannot be killed, and we said it's exclusively Rabbi Eliezer, because and then the Gemara says, no, everyone agrees you're not allowed to kill creatures with the exception of lice. Well, here we see that there is a distinction between fleas as well. Rashi says, no. You're introducing an item from left field. You're comparing apples to oranges. And although we do need to continue probing the Talmud's perspective on lice, don't mix us up with fleas. You know why? Seida ahariga karamis. We're talking about killing. This was a text about trapping. Trapping is a whole other story. There is a debate about trapping fleas. Rabbi Yeshua, I'm sorry, Demar Savar Davar Shein B'mino Nitzach Chayiv. Rabbi Elazar says, even though you don't usually trap fleas for anything constructive, they cannot pull a wagon, and they cannot feed an army, or even they cannot serve as a dish. But still, Rabbi Elazar says you're not allowed to trap them. Umar Savar, and Rabbi Yeshua says, Potter, you are allowed to trap them. In Hariga, feel Rabbi Yeshua Maida. When it comes to killing everybody, all the rabbis, even Rabbi Yeshua, would agree that you're not allowed to kill a flea because fleas reproduce. And the only animal that there's a debate about is lice. And so our Gemara has asserted, I believe, that all animals, all animals may not be killed on Shabbos, with the exception of lice. Lice are the exception because lice do not reproduce in the typical manner. The understanding that the Gemara itself gave to us is, how do we know if something reproduces or not? If it has eggs. Again, I'm not making this up, but when the Gemara asks, hold on, we have a reference to eggs. An egg, by definition, means that the creature comes from another parent creature. Now, here's the problem. Mark and others, most of us have either had a first-hand encounter with lice, or we've seen science textbooks or looked under a microscope, and we know that lice do lay eggs. And I think it's even a scientific fact that lice reproduce more or less the way most species do, with a male and female component. And so what do we do with the Gemara? The Gemara asserts that lice don't lay eggs, and the fact is lice do lay eggs. Anyone want to take a stab at this?
Rabbi,
Yes.
I've been treating lice for 50 years.
Okay.
You can't imagine how many people come into the store and scratching their heads, and I think I have lice. Could you check to see if I have lice? And we always check, and we always find lice.
Hold on. I didn't know this. So you can go to any pharmacist and they'll agree to check a person for lice?
We used to do it.
Okay, that's very gracious of you.
Yeah.
Okay, so
I think that I can say in defense of the Gemara is that an egg is not only something that comes from the body of the parent, but it's also something that on maturity produces the animal similar to the parent. Meanwhile, the lice go to the number of transformations. So what is produced from the lice, from the egg, is not a lice, but some kind of intermediate insect or whatever that has to later mature and transform into a louse.
So what you're saying is fascinating. Professor is giving us an original, scientific-oriented explanation. I have a question on your answer, but I love it, which is simply, you don't see the direct correlation between egg and lice.
Yeah, if the chicken egg is mature, then the chicken comes out.
Professor,
If
but
snake egg is mature, then a little snake comes out.
But what are you going to say?
Does that mean that butterflies do not propagate?
Oh, so I was going to ask about a butterfly.
Okay.
Doctor,
so
so you're saying it's a problem. That was the question I was going to ask. But I love your answer. Your answer definitely gives food for thought. Hold on. So I want to say there's really like 4 or 5 general answers. I hope I'll get it right. The last answer I want to give is based on something I've already shared with you. That's the one that I want to get at. But there are different answers. Some people say that, you know what, there are different kinds of lice. In the time of the Gemara, the Chazal were familiar with a lice that did not lay eggs. And it looked like it came de novo, just kind of developed out of the human condition on the human body. And although today, yes, we know lice do come from eggs, it was a different kind of lice. If you say that, there's big halachic implications. That would mean you are not allowed to kill a lice in 2022, because really, although we use the same word, and in Hebrew, kinim means lice, and in the 10 plagues, kinim means lice, but maybe we're talking about two different species. That would be one answer with an important halachic implication. There's another explanation that says, you know what? Lice do come from eggs, but there is a greater dependence on environmental conditions than usually the relationship between the egg and the creature that emerges. Again, I'm not trying to give you a scientific, I can't explain this scientifically, but let's say usually a creature, there is the mating of the male and female, and there's a fertilization of an egg, and then the egg develops with whatever kind of cultivation the parent has to contribute. Usually environment has not much role to play. I know with birds, there is a lot of, and other creatures, there is a lot of influence on temperature and the like, on the gender of that, or the viability of the egg. But maybe you will say that with lice, there is more of a dependency on a specific environment or other things about the host of the eggs. That's another explanation. And that would say that might be able to apply to lice to this day. Others say, well, there are those who want to say, okay, the Talmud only knew the science of its time. Then they were not aware of the fact that there are eggs, and so they didn't know. And so there's those who wish. I don't want to give legitimacy within the Jewish perspective, but there are actually Torah opinions that say, you know what? When the Chazal talk about science, they only were talking about the science of the day, the perspective of the day, and it's possible that science can be updated. And as a matter of fact, science is constantly being updated. Hold on. As a matter of fact, I heard an excerpt from a podcast yesterday of a scientist, and he was saying, to determine the age of the world, we have to make many assumptions. That the speed of light hasn't changed, and a lot of different things have been exactly the same. And this, again, I'm not a scientist and I cannot explain it. He said, it's quite possible that factors in our universe were not always static and consistent, and maybe we don't actually know the age of the universe. We have to go on certain metrics, and we make many assumptions. So the point is, maybe we make assumptions, but science is constantly evolving. But I want to give you the last answer, and then I want to hear other thoughts. One of the common explanations that are brought, and I mentioned this already, is that maybe the Gemara actually did know that science, and maybe the Chazal did know that lice actually have eggs. But we know that in halacha, there is a lot of credence given to what the naked eye can perceive. And there is almost what we might call a halachic fact. We discussed this when I mentioned bugs in the water, and we talked about other I forgot what else we discussed. We were discussing something else recently where we said that halacha might take into account what the eye sees. And so it's possible that the Chazal knew that there were eggs, but being that they are, and I don't know if they are, but being that maybe they were once considered, maybe they once were essentially microscopic, you couldn't see them. So to the naked eye observing, they would see, and it would appear as if lice appear de novo, and just out of the blue. And therefore, halachically, lice are apart from all other creatures where we can witness their development. And therefore, they were given a treatment that is distinct and unique, according to those who do say you're allowed to kill lice. Others say you can't. Reb Beryl, I muted everyone, so unmute and let's hear what you have to say. And thank you for your patience.
Struggling for nothing, Rabbi. Don't apologize for Chazal. Listen to this from Google. The present study conclusively established for the first time that both head and body lice reproduce to paternal genomic elimination, an unusual genetic system in which males transmit only their maternally derived chromosomes. So we don't maybe have to apologize even for Chazal.
Oh, so that's Taka, one of the other explanations that I saw in the survey of explanations, that maybe there is. And Rebel, I want to thank you for that. You get it. I was about to tell you, you leave Google alone, but you actually get an applause for that. That some of the opinions in this discussion say, you know what? Maybe there are anomalies in the way lice reproduce. And actually, I think the Rambam or someone else says, just because most creatures reproduce with a male and female, it doesn't mean that there are not going to be unique exceptions where the reproductive process is different or there are not anomalies. And Rebberal Yashikah for sharing that is very interesting. And maybe that's the meaning of the Gemara. So the only reason why I wanted to give you the reason why I wanted to share this is because this is a text that is frequently quoted in the discussion about the tension that exists between the Gemara and Chazal and science. And I don't want to claim that I've given you the fullness of the discussion, but I wanted to give you a little survey and why there's no need to be overly perturbed by this Gemara. Doctor?
So even if there are genetic anomalies, but I think the bottom line is, I think they still produce eggs. What bothers me is the Gemara itself quotes Beit Sekini. And then because somebody said there are no eggs, they're willing to call the quotation as basically fake news, and they make up a fact. Well, it's something else. It's not really Beit Sekini, but it is Beit Sekini, and that's what bothers me. That they painted themselves into a corner and are unwilling, in the face of another written scripture, to say, well, sorry, but there are no Beit Sekini.
Well, I think to the Chazal, a teaching in the Torah of the oral tradition has great enduring value, and so they're willing to consider all the options in synthesizing between a teaching of Chazal and the world around them. I understand that might be uncomfortable for us, but that's to them, Torah is paramount. And if you believe that that there's a creator and that maybe the Torah was part of that equation, well, then that's the world, that's the perspective that the Torah comes from. And maybe we don't like it, but it's good to see how the Torah.
I'm just saying the fact that they were unwilling to accept scripture itself, the Torah itself, what was written.
No, what do you mean?
And when it says Beit Sekini, because
it's not the Torah doesn't say Beit Sekini, it's a
no,
Chazal.
I understand not the Torah, but there is an asmachta from someplace else where it does say that God is in charge of everything from Karneri and into Beit Sekini. And the fact that they want to accept that, I mean, they brought it down. I do give them credit for bringing it down, because they could have ignored it completely and not even bring it down. They brought it down, but they ignored it.
So thank you for sharing that, Shkayach. And I wanted to show you real fast in the Shulchan Aruch, in the Code of Jewish Law. Lamaisa.
I could share something too before that. That lice eggs they're not called eggs, they're called nits. And whatever you want to say, you can't say each species has an interpretation of their own offsprings. And here they're talking about eggs, but they really mean nits.
Okay, I'm sorry. This is unappetizing. I'm not going to go. All right, let's take a look in the Shulchan Aruch. Thank you. It's good to have experts and professionals here. So, what do you think the halacha, the Shulchan Aruch, actually paskins? So we'll take a look from the top. This is Shin Tezayin 3:16 in the Shulchan Aruch in the Code of Jewish Law.
That's a flea.
Hold on. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. Pirush, a flea, which we mentioned in the Gemara too. Hanikra bargut b'lashon harav. The Arabic word for it is a bargut. Asur litzodo, you're not allowed to trap it. Elim kein hal b'sarai v'al katzil v'asur largo. If it's biting you, well then maybe you could remove it, but you still can't kill it. V'af lo yimili leno b'yado, don't also squeeze it. Shema yargenu, lest you kill it. Aliyat leno b'yadav v'zukan. If it's on you, it's biting you, then there is some latitude with removing it, but you cannot kill it.
Alan, it's interesting.
Hold on.
Bargut and bebit in French.
Avalkina.
Yeah, bebit.
Gentlemen.
It's okay. It's a Canadian joke.
Avalkina. Yosef Karo in the Shulchan Aruch says, Avalkina mutar laharga. You may kill a lice. But if you remove them from your clothing, don't kill them, remove them. But you're allowed to actually kill them from your head. Very interesting. So this is quoted in the Shulchan Aruch. The professor is thinking, probably, I'm not saying you're wrong, I'm just thinking out loud. maybe this has to do with the diseases they spread. That's certainly something interesting to consider. So the Mishnah Berurah says that
Also, it looks like you cannot kill an individual louse, but it's okay to kill them in mass in your clothes.
no. On the contrary, you can kill it if it's on your body. When you're removing it from your clothing, don't kill them, just remove them. Again, here, I'll show you in the English here. When cleansing his head, he may kill them. Let me go back here. He says, so there is a debate. The Beis Yosef says you actually can kill them. The Magen Avram was one of the commentaries, says that actually you shouldn't, because although it's not a biblical problem, it's still not allowed. I'm looking for an explanation for why you can kill it.
Is the status of a bird the same as the status of the hair?
A bird? You're not allowed to kill a bird.
No, I'm not talking about the bird. I'm talking about
beard. I'm sorry. I believe so. You see, it's a big discussion, but I'm just looking for headlines.
Why does he say you can't kill them, but you can squash them?
No. He's saying that when you're removing it from your clothing, you can't kill them. If you're removing it from your person, from your body, from your hair, you can.
But it says rather you may squash them.
Do me a favor. Let's focus. I just want to focus on the question at hand, which is the commentary on killing lice, and then we can go back to that. They were talking here. Why is there a distinction between a flea and lice? And he quotes our Gemara because we learn it from the laws of Shabbos and from the Mishkan. And the Elam Adamim, look, this is exactly our Gemara. Here, here he elaborates. It doesn't come from the male and female. It's born out of the human sweat. It comes forth. It does not get treated. It doesn't have the full treatment of a full creature. We're dehumanizing lice. And then he compares it to fleas, which also you don't always see the way they also seem to appear de novo because the eggs are also within stuff and they just kind of seem to emerge. But anyways, nonetheless, you're not allowed to kill a flea because it does come from.
It doesn't produce eggs. A flea doesn't produce eggs.
Right.
A flea
All right. Anyways,
produces butterfly.
Yep. Anyways, all right. So that's the Gemara. So we see Lach Lamaisa, many paskin that even to this day, perhaps one is allowed to kill lice. And that's very interesting. Very, very interesting.
Rabbi, what is considered killing for lice and that kind of stuff if you have in the old days a thing like flypaper, which is always hanging, and then on Shabbos it happens to kill some of these
we're talking about a human proactively taking life. We're not talking about if you have a trap out or a flea catcher out. We're talking about you taking your hand and taking the life, the louse and killing it.
So if you exterminate your house and the residue is enough to kill them during Shabbat, you're okay.
Again, I'm sorry.
If you fumigate your house and the residue of that poison kills them, no problem.
I'm not going to say no problem, but that's not what we're describing here as killing. No.
How much Colada shampoo did you sell, Alan?
Tons.
And the comb and the real Mont comb? Do you know we have a lady in Montreal?
See, hold on. Let me just explain. My friends, we have two pharmacists here who have a lot of experience on the topic. And it's always good that we have a diverse group of professionals here to give us professional insight to every topic we have.
I think
So-
the most,
Doctor, go ahead.
the most experienced person, even more than a pharmacist, is a school nurse. You go to
Yes.
any good yeshiva,
We,
Yes.
we have
they have a nurse who specializes in that.
we
This
have a
is
woman
true.
in Montreal who's called the lice lady. She goes
Yeah,
from school to
they're
school.
all over the place. Everybody's got, every community has a lice lady.
Mhm.
Right.
Do you have is there like a bumper sticker for that? I'm the lice lady. Special parking.
You may laugh, but I know her, and her husband's retired, and she's still working. So don't knock it.
Hold on, and they probably have a house in Yerushalayim and a house in Miami. They're doing okay.
Right.
All right. So this concludes our discussion about lice. Admittedly, not the most appetizing topic on one hand, but an important and very interesting discussion. There's a whole lot more, of course, on the subject. I just wanted to give a basic exposure to this important segment in the Talmud.
Rabbi, just on,
Yes,
on, the
Doctor.
light, on the light side, continuing the light side, what they ask of the lice lady's husband is, what are you, a man or a mouse? Squeak up.
Yep. All righty, let's see the next Gemara. Hatsadon litzorechai. So he said to trap an animal, even if it's not commonly trapped, but if you have a use for it, you're chayiv. That's what the Mishnah says. Mantona, who is of the opinion that you're chayiv for trapping an animal that doesn't have a common use? I'm sorry. Who says you're exempt if you don't need it? So the Gemara says this is Rabbi Shimon. Shimon famously says, "Malacha she'ein tzricha legufa." If the malacha is being done, but you're not doing it with the intention of what the malacha provides, if you're not doing it for its own sake, tur aleha, you are exempt. And so Rabbi Shimon is the one who says, if you trap an animal and you don't need the animal, you are patur. Now we're going to see something that is somewhat familiar. We read this not long ago, and Mark, you'll very strongly recognize this from our private halacha study session. There are those who apply this idea, the teaching of Rabbi Yehuda Marav, not to the question of trapping shalol letzorech. They apply it to hamepis mursa b'Shabbos, draining a boil on Shabbos. We're taught him lasais lapeh chayiv, if you do it, to have an opening which will allow exposure and air and continued drainage. So then you're chayiv, but if it's for a one-time extraction of pus, I know we're getting from more and more appetizing. Patur, one is exempt. Mantana, who teaches that you're allowed to pop a blister for drainage. Amar Rabbi Yehuda Marav Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi Yehuda Marav says this is the teaching of Rabbi Shimon. The Amar Malacha shein tzricha legufa patur la, who says that if you do not need malacha, you're not doing it for its own sake, you are patur. Why is this considered a malacha shein tzricha legufa? You're making a Pesach, you're making an opening, but you don't actually need the opening. You just needed a single extraction. And an opening means it is two directional. If you have any more questions, we'll ask Mark to explain. Not because Mark is an expert in boils, but because Mark studied this topic, just to be clear. Alternatively, the same teaching is applied to a third teaching. Hatzad nachash b'Shabbos, trapping snakes on Shabbos. Imisasek shaloi yishuchenu. If what you're doing is working to avoid being bitten, patur, you're patur. You're not trapping the snake because you want to make a snakeskin shoes. You're trapping the snake because you don't want to get bitten. If you're catching the snake because there are remedies and the venom can be used in medicine or in scientific research, chayiv, you are chayiv. Mantana, who says that if you trap an animal and don't intend to have it for research or to eat it or to sell it, this is the opinion of Rabbi Shimon. Amar malacha who says when you do malacha not for its own sake, you are exempt. And this trapping the snake is usually the act of trapping is to acquire, to obtain the animal. Here you're just trapping it to be rid of it. Or alternatively, you don't want to trap a snake. You'd rather never encounter the snake. You're upset that you have to trap the snake because that itself puts up your blood pressure and has your life flashing before you. You don't want to have that experience. That is not Litzorech Gufa. Rashi, Nami Hatzei Dehi Malacha. Vizua Ene Tzarech Litzei Da Ela Shleite Shechena. The Malacha is trapping. You're not trapping to have it, you're trapping to be rid of it. And had he known that this snake was a friendly snake, he would never touch it to begin with. In Florida, they tell us, if red touches yellow, you know this teaching? If red touches, here they say, if red touches black, there's a rhyme for coral snakes. If you don't know this, here. Florida has different snakes. If red touches yellow, they may say, you're a dead fellow. That's a coral snake. Stay away. Trap it. Avoid it. If red touches black, but if the red and the black are touching, you're okay, Jack. This is a Florida thing they teach the Florida kids. And so if you encounter red touching yellow, you're going to trap it or avoid it, and you really don't want to meet it. You see this snake, the harmless snake, you leave it alone. Now, out of curiosity, would you, in a moment when the snake happens upon you, would you be able to discern between these two snakes? I wouldn't. But okay. See, Beryl, what do you say?
Just a general question. I wouldn't want to be close enough to see the difference. What is the practical effect of saying this is the saying of Rav Shmuel? What is it? Does that mean forget about what we said before, or it doesn't make halacha? It's just an opinion. What's the basic meaning of referring to someone who said it?
You're asking a good question. What you're asking is, but let's back up. The Gemara very much wants to preserve the chain of custody of a tradition. And so if a teaching, and we want to determine who says what, because different authorities carry different degrees of weight in the halachic conversation, and we want to identify, is this a das yachid? Is this one specific sage's opinion, or is it being presented to us as the consensus opinion? It's not quite as simple as I'm making it out, but generally speaking, we know Yachid v'Rabim, halacha kirabim. Usually we'll follow the majority opinion. And so we want to identify if what's being expressed here is a minority opinion or majority opinion. What makes this more complicated is there are a number of specific rules. Different Chazal commonly argue. And for example, Rav and Shmuel, and there are certain genres of halacha that will prefer Rav, others that will prefer Shmuel. For example, etc., like Beisham and Beisil. So the more we know who says what, the more data we have to determine what the Psak Halach is. The reason why it's a little complicated is Mark and I began to survey this in the Shulchan Aruch, and there's vast discussions. If on the basis of this Gemara, you're allowed to pop a pimple or a blister or not, on the basis of this Gemara, are you allowed to trap a snake or not? And a lot of it has to do with if the Gemara is telling us that this is a das yachid or a das rabbim. So again, I don't want to fall way down, but that's the discussion. So if our Mishnah is a consensus, a Mishnah, well then you'd be allowed to trap the non-8 shrotzim. But if this is the distinct opinion of Rabbi Shimon, who generally is more relaxed and permissive, well then that might have carried the day. Let's take a fast peek into the Shulchan Aruch. This is again of Rabbi Yosef Karo, the Shulchan Aruch, based on our Mishnah, Shmeina Shratzim, Hatzadon, Ma'chayvel Behen, if you trap them, hurt them, even if they didn't die, even if there's no blood, you're chayiv. Other creatures, Einai chayiv, Elam Kein Yatzim Hem Dam. Hatzadon L'Tzayr chayiv, Shaloi L'Tzayr Chestam Pater, Aval Asr. Well, the Rambam chayiv. So the Shulchan Aruch says generally the teaching is that if you do Shaloi L'Tzayr, we'd be inclined to follow our Mishnah, follow Rabbi Shimon and say you're Pater. The Rambam paskins no. The Rambam says you're chayiv, and you know why the Rambam says you're chayiv? The Rambam looks at our Gemara and says, "Oh, this is a minority opinion, and therefore the Psak does not follow this Mishnah, and therefore you're chayiv for trap." If that was confusing or long-winded, ignore it. But suffice it to say, Reb Beryl it's critically important for the Gemara to determine who is the author of the Mishnah and the weight that comes with this Mishnah.
Just wanted, if you don't mind, go back for 1 second to the issue of the eggs.
Okay.
So in the defense of the Gemara, and I think you alluded to, centuries ago, there was always the concept, the idea of spontaneous reproduction,
Mhm.
that fleas, for instance, or maggots,
Right?
just spontaneously erupted, either came up from either dust or from dead material.
Right.
So that was the regular conventional wisdom at the time.
Right. Right.
No, so
Right.
I'm just saying that I can understand the Gemara saying there were no.
So basically, you could say it two ways. You could say that was the science of the time, and so you can only take into consideration the facts that are known to you. But if you'll take it a step further, it's possible that the Chazal didn't care, because what you cannot see with the human beings, the Torah was given not to scientists. The Torah is not given to people to go around with a microscope. The Torah was given to the average Jew, even if you're stranded on a deserted island. And so you're only expected to make calls on the basis of what your eyes can see. And so there is a strong case to be made that many times where the Gemara negates, if you will, or takes a position that seems to run opposite to science, one of the questions to ask is the Gemara really challenging, debating, or disagreeing with science? Or is the Gemara saying that for the purposes of halacha, what the facts are based on what the eye can see? And whatever is microscopic, you're not halachically warranted to take that into account. Yes, for the purpose of science, for research, it's necessary. But you don't have, so that's a prevailing and popular shita that's brought by contemporary poskim, and it's it's one of the popular. I'm forgetting now. It's one of the great. Anyways, Rebel.
First of all, science is always evolving. You get a stronger microscope. 10 years from now, you might see something that you didn't see today.
True.
So that's going to be my next question. If science evolves and facts change, how does halacha look at it? Do we say, well, Rishonim knew better than us, or do we?
We're not saying that the Rishonim. No one is making the claim that Rishonim knew science better than us, but they knew halacha better than us, and so their halachic assertions carry a lot of weight, even if science paints. Because again, most likely what science is going to introduce to us is again beyond the limits or the reach of the naked eye.
I always come back to my father's favorite Mishnah in Pirkei Avot. Dalifnei mi ata tzarich latet din v'cheshbon. You come upstairs and I have to explain killing a lice. I settle right now.
Rabbi, you know what they say? Actually, I shouldn't say this, but I'll say it anyways. There was like old shtetl Jew, and they once caught him not wash. He like mixed up the netilas yadayim. He was mixing. He washed in the wrong hand, or he forgot one pour. Someone said, "Oh, what are you doing?" He says, "When I go up there and they're going to beat me for this sin, I'm going to know that I'm at the end of the line." He was saying, "Halavai, this will be my biggest breach." Again, not to make little of Jewish practice and tradition, but I wanted to start this. Oh, it's 11. Let's just take a look, and we'll continue next on Monday. Again, Sunday we're not going to be here Monday. Amar Shmuel, Hashayla Dag Ben Ayam. What happens if you scoop a fish out of the sea? When have you killed it? When is the shechita? Right, you know that mammals that are kosher, there's shechita. But when is a fish considered? When have you killed a fish? Do you have to actually kill it, be a dime, or is the act of scooping it out of the sea enough? Or yes, kivan sheyavish by kesela. Once the fish is dried and there's an area of dry skin the size of a small coin, chayiv, the fish is now irrevocably going to die. That's as long as the dryness is by the fins. Even if it's not entirely dry, if it starts becoming sticky, there's the mucus that forms on the fish. The fish is already dead. Rashi reminds us, and we're going to stop over here. We're talking about an instance maybe where you're not trapped, because usually to catch a fish you're already chayiv. So why are we talking about killing the fish? You're chayiv for trapping it. So he says, what happens, for example, if you catch the fish and you put it in a little chest or in a bucket? So the fish has already been caught, but now you take it out of the bucket. So then we're talking about what's considered netilas neshama, what's considered killing fish, and it'll lead to an interesting discussion that we'll continue with Hashem's help on Monday. So just a real fast recap. Today's discussion was dominated by the discussion about lice, but really it was about comparing or determining the author of our Mishnah. Was the Mishnah a consensus Mishnah? Did everyone agree that you're not allowed to kill other critters? Or was it exclusively the opinion of Rabbi Elazar? The Gemara seems to want to say that all of the sages agree that you cannot kill. The only exception would be lice, which maybe is not considered a full-fledged creature because it's not like the ram. And we had the discussion we had. Dear friends, thank you all for joining. May we have a blessed, peaceful Shabbos. Let's hope before Shabbos, or certainly by the time Shabbos is over, we can hear a reversal of all the insanity in the world. But most importantly, the dear members of our Chabura should be blessed with health, happiness, wellness. Those that are in front of the screen, those that are behind the screen, we should only have an abundance of good, happy news to share. Thank you all so much.
Could I ask another question?
Yes, Alan, go real fast if you don't mind, because Rishon, you're going to do Chumash, right? All right, because in the moment we're going to end the link and we're going to do Chumash. Go ahead.
When a fish gives birth to babies,
yes,
the babies can be eaten by the fish.
Yes.
So what if you trap those babies to prevent them from being killed?
I'm not certain we would differentiate between the different reasons for trapping, but it's a good question. I don't know, but ostensibly not.
Okay.
The question is if they're already caught, so then taking them or scooping them or moving them might not be considered trapping at all. Anyways, have a wonderful day. Shkoyach, good Shabbos. Yeah, this Shabbos is Shabbos Zachar, so don't forget.